Thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am happy to be here with you. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I thank you for being here because you make the difference. You make this worthwhile. That's why I do this. Now, everyone, I want to start off today. It's a midweek episode here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, and just a couple things that have come up that really have caught my attention, and I want to be able to express that with you. I, of course, want to be talking about Governor Cuomo and his most recent action, which takes away the power of the individuals, of the citizenry. It's kind of reminiscent of, well, Obamacare and it's tried and true. I mean, you've heard this all the time. It's similar to Nazis. It's true of any totalitarian government where the government is infringing on the rights of the individuals. And I'm going to go into that to a degree and talk about that because I think it's really important. But I also want to be talking about a couple of other things. Some news, a recent poll coming out of Cranes, New York, Cranes about New York and single-payer healthcare, and that's an important thing, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I definitely want to talk about President Obama and Iran and the latest news that has come out, which is incredible. It's devastating news, and it's very important for us to understand international policy and how it has changed and how it has improved for the average American and how we're safer now than we were before. Because this is important. This is a big deal. And I'm going to go over that. And I think you may be hearing news announcements about it, but I want to go over that. But something I want to start off with before any of that is something that has to do with race relations here in the United States. And something that I thought was a very odd thing that happened to me today. And I want to share that with you. So I was walking down the street. I was going to a meeting this morning at 10 o'clock. Here in Binghamton, New York, in the central New York, Southern Tier region. And I was going to my meeting, and I happened to be walking down Main Street of Binghamton, a city of about 40,000 plus people. So not huge, not tiny, but in the middle of the day, on any given day, it's not Manhattan. You know, you're not going to have 100 people trying to cross the street at any point in time. What you're going to get is you have maybe, 5 people on any one block at any given time once you step out of downtown, and even sometimes in downtown itself. So I'm walking down, and literally there's over 1,000 feet in front of me and behind me. There is no one. There are no people. There's no one around. Cars, of course, going back and forth. And a car drives up next to me. There's 3 people in the car. And one rolls down the window and looks out and says, "Hey, can you help me with directions? I'm trying to go over to the social services building." And, no big deal. I kind of turned over and looked at them and said, "Okay, sure, I'll help you." And, gave them directions to get to there because it was just a couple of blocks behind me on Main Street as I was trying to get to downtown. So I'd actually just passed the building. And I told them exactly where they needed to go. Now, here's the thing that's very interesting about it, and it's a truly unique part of this. What I didn't put in there is the 3 people in the car were white. I'm a black Puerto Rican. They stopped and they asked me about the directions to the social services, the DSS building. Now, is that racist? Because a lot of people would have you believe, in telling that kind of a story, that this is an example of the racism in the United States. That white people assumed, since I'm black, that I would know where the social services building is, and that I would be able to direct them to it, because I'm black. So the assumption would be, some would say, well, it's a racist microaggression. They're asking you about that because you're black. And see, if you take that point of view, and it's very important to think about this. Again, let me go over it. I'm walking down the street. A car stops. 3 people who happen to be white lower the window and ask me, a black Puerto Rican, where is the directions to go to the social services building in Binghamton, New York. That, some would say, is a microaggression. They picked me out because I'm black. The other part that they're not emphasizing, and the thing that's important, over 1,000 feet in front of me and in back of me, about a block and a half, 2 blocks in Binghamton, there are no people. There is no one else for them to ask on either side of the road, just me. And they stopped and they asked me that, and I was able to give them directions because it happens to be on Main Street and I had just passed it going to a meeting. If you take this as a microaggression, that this is something that was done simply because of my race, then you're looking at this, you are inherently and implicitly and explicitly looking at this as race first, which is what we have been training, or the media has been training us to be able to see this as. Social media, the news media, are looking at this from a racial viewpoint. And if this was on the news, you'd hear about, oh my God, white people are asking a black man about social services because they assume he's on it. That's not correct. That's not the way to look at this. How about the viewpoint of, I'm the only person on the road that they can speak to and ask questions about directions. If they had asked me the directions to the high school or to the nearest gas station or to a store, and I'm the only person on the road, would that be racist? Any other building. If they wanted to get to the closest post office, would it be racist because they stopped and I'm the only person on the road and they asked me? Because there is the difference. Microaggressions, and if you ask most students, they would say this is a microaggression. You have been microaggressed because someone asked you as a person of color, where is the social services building, rather than a human being saying, hey, you're the only human being on the road on this main street. Let me ask you for directions because I don't know where I'm going. And see, that's the difference we have to understand. Inherently, if we are only looking at people as these micro categories, that I'm black, that I'm Hispanic, that some would assign me a lower income, which isn't true, because I'm a homeowner here in Binghamton. I'm a business owner here in Binghamton. I'm not a rich man by any means. I'm a working class person, but that doesn't mean I'm poor. But if you listen to that and say, oh my God, a black man was asked this, well, then you're assuming that to put me into that category, to say I am someone that someone else would assume would be on social services, then you are assigning black people the limitation that you must be, that's the common thought, that this is a common event. You're assuming racism to start the conversation. You're implying a racist viewpoint. You're implying that I am less by the start of the conversation, that I am a lesser person just because of the color of my skin. And that's insulting. Whether or not those people were or were not racist, I will never know. I've never seen them before, and I don't care, because that's not what the conversation was about. The conversation was about directions. And it just struck me. How many times do we hear these stories that, depending on the way it's explained and the viewpoint of the person providing it, it's suddenly either racist or it's just a story. It's just something that happened. See, it's the implication of race. This undertone that we're supposed to view it racially first rather than as human beings. That is the problem. That I must be assigned to a category of being black and or Hispanic, and I must be assigned an economic category of being in low income. That only then justifies that it must be racist because of the question that's being asked, which is stupid. Because it also leaves out the fact that these are 3 white people trying to get to that same building, the social services building. So they obviously have a need of social services. Perhaps they're poor. Perhaps they are economically challenged. Now, no one's addressing that. Is that a question that came up into your mind? So I say this, and I bring this up because it is important to understand. When we hear these stories, when we're hearing people talk about these so-called microaggressions, what is the frame that they're putting on this? What is the viewpoint? Are they starting with a racial intent? Are they making this racial? Is it racist to start with? And I have to tell you, if someone had told me that and they said, Mike, and I've had this conversation with a few people recently on a couple of different subjects, and they're talking about, well, it's racist. Don't you see that? I'm like, no, I don't. It's human. These are people interacting. Why must I assume that because one person is a person of color and the other is not, then it must be racial? That's insane. Why are we assuming and burdening people with race in situations that are not racial? And I have to say, I've been alive for 50 years. That's 5 decades. 40 of them have been, teens and above, of course. And I have experienced racism. Not nearly the racism of the 1950s and the 1960s with the civil rights movement. Not nearly, and I would never compare myself to that. But I can say the racism of the 70s and the 80s, even part of the 90s, is nowhere near what we see today in 2018. It's not the same. It is not the same environment. It is not the same culture. Not nearly. And to assume that and impose this racist viewpoint onto interactions is insane. Because I guarantee you, if you were to say this to a student today, they have been taught that this is a microaggression, which is a made-up term, and that this is some kind of insult to my race and to me. And they make this racial to confirm their racist viewpoint that this is racial. It is insane. It is like the self-segregation, which is no different than segregation. To say that a black person is being racist is the same as to say any person can be racist, white, black, whatever. And that's the key here. We are putting people in these boxes that do not apply and should not be applied in situations that are not some kind of conflict that then dehumanizes us all. If you were to hear this from someone else and they said, oh my God, that white person just asked a black person about directions to social services, how racist are they? Then you are racist. That is a racist assumption. It is a person asking another person about directions to a place. And if you replace the word social services building with post office, with supermarket, with gas station, it's not racist. It's someone asking for directions. If you change this, if it was the other way around and a black person was asking a white person about how to get to social services building, is it racist? No, it is not racist. It's again, someone asking for directions. This is the important thing that we're not hearing. We are being trained to look at this in a box. This person fits in this box, and anything that affects this box must be some kind of ism. It's racism, ageism, sexism. I don't even know. All the different stupid isms. It is wrong. And they're microaggressions. And that means that it's a crime. It's an act of violence against you. And we hear this all the time from schools and colleges and teachers and educators and the liberal intelligentsia telling us that these things are aggressions. If it's a microaggression, it's aggression, which is a crime. That some form of violence has been done against you. And violence is a crime. This is a crime being committed against you. And that is insane. When someone asks you for directions, it's not a crime. It's not some assault. You have not been violated. And I use this example to highlight exactly what I'm talking about here, because it is that simple. If we make it into something that is racial, then it will be racial. But that means we have, in doing so, we have, one, become the racist, and two, we have done a disservice to everyone involved and those who hear the story. that's something to think about. Not everyone will agree, but I wanted to share that with you. And hopefully I'll hear from others. Tell me what you think about it, because maybe you think I'm wrong. Please tell me how I'm wrong and that this was something racist. Please do share that with me. But until then, I'm going to take a little break, and then I'll come back, and I want to talk about President Obama and Iran and what we have just learned about that. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You'll be hearing from Matt Cornwell. His latest album is Icarus, and this is track 12, Break the Habit.
I ain't had your ways. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. I think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause of where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back at the ever-popular No Soundbites Allowed podcast, and I thank you for being here with you. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I do appreciate each and every one of you as you listen and join us every week as we make our podcasts here, because you make it all worthwhile. That's why I do this, and I thank you for that. So now I want to talk a little bit about some of the news that's out here right now. And it's a little bit of a news flash, so my favorite. Newsflash. Newsflash. That's right. I love my little sound effects when I can use them here. So it is a news flash. It's just news out coming today that there is a new development that we have learned about the Obama administration and its dealings with the nation of Iran, in particular in reference to the sanctions and money that we have provided to the nation of Iran. Now, I want to go back before I get into this so that you have full context, get a good understanding of what we're talking about here. Back in November of 2013, And actually, in 2000, even earlier than that, President Obama and the State Department had been talking with the nation of Iran and were working on trying to put together a nuclear deal. And it was back in November of 2013 that the following quote was made by the Iranian president Hassan Rouhani. And he said, quote, "Let anyone make his own reading, but this right is clearly stated in the text of the agreement that Iran can continue its enrichment, and I announce to our people that our enrichment activities will continue as before." End quote. That was November of 2013 by Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Now that's important. They're talking about putting together a nuclear deal, a non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and to limit the growth of a nuclear development program by Iran. We know they are working on putting together a nuclear weapon, and we know that they are roughly a year away from completing such a program. And we also know that they are roughly 10 years away from having a missile that would be able to reach the United States. At this moment, they don't have that technology. It is something that they have been continuing to work on. And the deal that was ultimately completed in 2016 was in reference to included a limitation on the number of centrifuges that Iran would have, which would limit the number of enriched uranium that it would be able to create to make a nuclear weapon, as well as allowing Iran to continue to develop missiles that would be able to reach the United States, one of its key goals. And finally, it allowed us to give Iran billions in dollars, besides $400 million in cash and an estimated $33 billion of frozen assets to release for them. Now, this is a big deal. And I wrote about in the first article when I quoted Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. This is part of an article I wrote in April 21st of 2015 called "A Good Deal for Iran, but What About Everyone Else?" And you can look that up at the mvass.com website, and you'll see that article. In 2016, and to be exact, it was July 14th of 2016, after the deal had been made, I went back and I was reviewing this in an article called "How Safe is the World After Iran Nuclear Deal?" It's a really good question. And we know that what Iran's position was in November of 2013. After having the deal made, we see that it was Secretary John Kerry of the Obama administration on January 21st of 2016 said in an interview with CNBC that he thinks, and I'll quote him, quote, "I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRCG or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorist." End quote. That is then Secretary John Kerry on January 21st, 2016 in an interview with CNBC. Okay. So you understand, the IRCG is Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a group of terrorists, internationally recognized group of terrorists, and it's their terrorism wing. That is impressively scary. Secretary Kerry is admitting that the billions of dollars that were given to Iran as part of the nuclear deal funded terrorism. He understands that. And whether that's $5 or it's $500 million or a couple $1 billion, it doesn't matter. He is saying that the United States actively, through the use of the Iran nuclear deal, which was not ratified by Congress, was an executive order by President Obama. So President Obama alone agreed to this. That deal funded terrorism around the world from the United States. And that brings us to today, because as part of that deal, we wanted to understand what was going on. Okay. And we do know that as of September of 2016, it was confirmed that more than $1.3 billion in cash was paid to Iran. And that comes from the Wall Street Journal as of, again, September 6, 2016. So that brings us to today's news. And I know a lot of people don't like Fox News, so I didn't use them as a source. But if you were to look at CBS News, which has an article from today, which is June 6, 2018, the title is The GOP Senate Report Says Obama Officials Gave Iran Access to U.S. Financial Systems. This is also covered by the Washington Times. In their article from today, that Obama hid efforts to aid Iran's windfall. Now, if you want to read both of these, they're very good articles because it's very clear. And I want to quote from here, Senator Rob Portman today stated on the CBS News article that, quote, the Obama administration misled the American people and Congress because they were desperate to get a deal with Iran. That's interesting. In addition, we have in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Times, the article, and it says in there that Ali Akbar Saleh, who is head of Iran's nuclear agency, that they are preparing to dramatically increase the capacity for enrichment for Iran. Now, this is important because we already knew that in November of 2013, Iran has said they're not stopping their enrichment program. We know that during the deal and immediately after the deal that Iran said they're not stopping their nuclear program, that they're going to continue to move forward with it. In fact, in my article in 2015, in April of 2015, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, quote, we will continue enriching. We will continue research and development, end quote. So Iran had never had an intention to not enrich and continue its nuclear program. Iran had no intention and has actively continued its missile program to be able to attack all of Europe and the United States and Israel. We know this. We know for a fact that over $1.3 billion, estimated $33 billion, was released and given to Iran, in part from the United States and other countries, that allowed them to fund terrorism around the world. And it gets worse. Because the Obama administration, as we now know, and has come out, the Obama administration went even further and went to try and release $5.7 billion of funds for Iran so that it could fund terrorism, at least in part. That we went out there, that the Obama department under Treasury Secretary, then Treasury Secretary Lew, went out and they went to two banks, which would have to be, I believe, Chase and Wells Fargo, two of the largest banks in the world and in the United States, and went to, the articles, no one's mentioning who, but they went to two major banks in the United States and asked them to convert the Iranian dollars, which are basically non-transferable. They're not international currency, to convert the Iranian Rouhani dollar and convert it into American dollars so then it could be changed into euros so that Iran could use the money. They can't use dollars. According to the sanctions, even after the Iran nuclear deal, they can't use dollars. They have to use something else. So euros is the next best thing. But to get there, they need to transfer into US dollars to then buy another currency. It's just because the US dollar rule, is the international currency. So Obama effectively tried to break the law to give Iran the ability to use US dollars, which by sanctions, even after a nuclear deal, they can't do, to give them $5.7 billion that they didn't have access to otherwise. And Secretary Kerry admits that the money that we are providing to Iran is being used, at least in some part, to give terrorism. That is insane. And people should be terrified. I mean, I'm trying to walk this through as simply as possible, but yet as quickly as possible so I can talk about this. Because that is the core thing to understand. The Obama administration, behind the backs of the public, because during the time that this was being done in 2016, the Obama administration said they would never help Iran clear the money, that they would not give Iran access to the U.S. markets to translate its money into US dollars so that they could spend the money that they otherwise couldn't spend, to be able to fund terrorism. That was their way to not fund terrorism. We gave them $1.3 billion directly in cash, plus, and that was in euros, plus $33 billion, maybe $150 billion, depending on whose estimate you want to look at. And we did all of this, and we explicitly were not able to do it by sanctions. And yet the Obama administration did that and told Congress and the American people, no, we would never do that. That is not something that we were doing. That was something that was beyond, it was illegal. Well, correction. It wasn't illegal. It was prohibited. You couldn't do that. And the backlash, both publicly and financially, is severe. Matter of fact, that's the reason why the two banks that the Obama administration pleaded to go out there and do this for them rejected it and said, no, they're not going to do it because of the legal and financial and public ramifications of helping Iran get $5.7 billion and use that to commit crimes with terrorism around the world. They weren't going to do that. They're not that crazy. So it didn't happen through the United States directly, but Iran did eventually clear that money through Europe. But that's got to scare you. That's incredible. The Obama administration lied. And apparently it wasn't just that the Obama administration's international policy, especially in the Middle East, was about appeasement, which is the Iran nuclear deal. It's not just about appeasement, but this is a proactive attempt to help nations that would see every American dead and help fund terrorism. America was helping to fund terrorism. That is insane. How can you not be upset about that? I want to hear from all the people who want to defend Obama, how great he was. We actively funded terrorism, and President Obama authorized and tried to allow and enact violations of sanctions that were there to protect the world, and he was trying to violate that behind the backs of the public and Congress. Because he told Democrats and Republicans alike in the Congress he wouldn't do that. And then he did it. He tried to get it done. And it was only because the banks were afraid of the backlash financially and publicly. That's the only reason why it didn't get done. That is terrifying. Is this what the Democrats are looking at? He is the leader of the Democratic Party. That is a fact. He is the former president. He leads the Democratic Party. And this is the mantra. This is the mindset that they are going forward on. I would love to hear from candidates regionally. For me, that would be Anthony Brindisi, who's running for the New York 22nd District. I would ask him, how can you justify that? Do you believe in funding terrorism? And if you do not, why have you not stood up and say you are against it? Why did you not denounce the actions of President Obama? And now that we know that there were secret deals behind our backs again from the Democratic Party, how can you not come out and denounce this and say you reject it? That's what every single Democratic candidate should do. Every single candidate elected official should do. They should come out and denounce this, denounce President Obama, and said that they do not, categorically will not fund terrorism around the world through Iran or North Korea or anywhere else. And that any action that does so should be made aware to the public and be stopped. That we cannot allow this. Think about that. President Obama tried to fund terrorism with $5.7 billion behind the backs of the American people because he knew they wouldn't agree. Does that change your opinion of the Democratic Party? Because I tell you what, it changes mine. I'm a conservative Republican with a very conservative viewpoint. And I have to tell you, it changes my point of view because I didn't even think, as bad as I thought the Iranian nuclear deal was, I had no idea and would never have guessed that they would have gone so far as to fund terrorism by violating sanctions and lying to the public. That's a step even further than I thought they would go. It is insane. It is wrong, and it is dangerous. It is a danger to the nation. And I am insulted that this happened. And I don't know what we can do about it at this point, other than to try and get more transparency in our government and hold these officials accountable and demand that all of the Democratic candidates, local, state, and federal, and in particular, Anthony Brindisi, who's running for the New York 22nd, to come out and condemn this and pledge to the American people that they will make sure that everything is transparent if they were to win an election and be elected, to make sure that nothing of this kind of nature would ever happen again. That's my viewpoint on that. But we're going to take another break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about, another fun guy, Governor Cuomo, and one of his ideas about how to help, how to take away your Second Amendment rights. And we're going to take this break, though, and we're going to listen to, again, Matthew Cornwell, and his Icarus album. And this is his 14th track on that album, As the World Turns.
I say, lady, I'm feeling like we ain't got no damn patience. Excuses why we cannot do this face to face, and then we cry, wonder why we ain't on the same damn page. If there's one thing I know, it's that this world keeps turning, and no one seems concerned. Whoa, that this world keeps turning. One thing I learned, 'cause mama don't sleep at night since the sun done up and down. Ain't no brother's keeper, and no one looking out for the sisters neither. And these families ain't no families, and no one giving second chances. I don't understand why it seems like this world keeps turning, no one seems concerned. Yeah, lately I'm feeling like you don't see me the same way. Excuses, but it's written on your face, and then we fight another night. This time we've been wasting. No, I don't understand why we could have it all, throw it all away, just 'cause everything we want don't go our way. Why? Just take a look outside, people losing lives. I'm just trying to see this world is much bigger than you and Lady, I'm feeling like we could make this all okay. No excuses, girl, we need to find a way and take our time and do this right before this all fades away. 'Cause if there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. If there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning, no one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning, no one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning, no one seems concerned.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back at the ever-popular No Soundbites Allowed. I thank you for being here with you. I'm your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I thank you. I thank you for listening to the program so far. I thank you for always being involved, and I always look forward to your feedback and your comments. Please let me know how you think the show is going and how we can improve. And I also thank Matt Cornwell for his wonderful song there and letting us being able to use that on the show during our breaks. So I want to go into, in the last 24 hours, there's been some news. Now, I've talked about how we're looking at micro categories that are trying to separate people into different racial groups and different economic groups, and how that's tearing apart our nation by this kind of mindset. And I'm looking at, in the second segment, we're talking about how President Obama and his Treasury Department under the Obama administration went behind the backs of Americans to try and allow funds to be used for terrorism and to help facilitate that at $5.7 billion. And these are things that are tearing at our nation, in our face and behind the scenes. Little things that, and not quite so little at all, that are building up and tearing at us. And it's terrifying. But there's another aspect that's also important to understand. It's about the Second Amendment. And I'm a huge advocate of the Second Amendment. Huge. And I saw this article, and it came out. It was first announced by WHEC News 10. And then it was also spoken about by Syracuse.com and a few other agencies, about Governor Cuomo, who's up for re-election. And his stance is he's doubling down on his anti-Second Amendment rhetoric. And he is looking to do something that is very dangerous. And it's actually part of a bigger plan, because it is part of what's called a red flag law. It's part, or sometimes they're called extreme risk protection orders, or ERPO. And what these are laws that allow the government to come into your home and take your firearms because you are, quote, a danger to yourself and the community, or the community. And they can take your firearms without due process, without you being in a trial. They can go in, just the police and a judge, and they can order to break into your home, violate your Fourth Amendment rights, take your firearms, violate your Second Amendment rights, and you have a year to go into court and prove that you are not a danger to yourself and or the public, and supposedly get your firearm back. And I know of at least one case where an individual did, in fact, beat the government, is supposed to be returned their firearm, and the government lost their firearm. No one knows where it is. So that's just part of the corruption and insanity of all this. They're taking your gun and they're either destroying it or losing it. Who knows what they did, because they don't want you to have that firearm, period. And the way to do it is to take away your right to face your accusers and to be in the court of law and prove your case, because it's going to protect people, quote unquote. Protect who? From whom? Because some stranger says that you're a danger. The government says, okay, and that's good enough for us. We'll go and break into your house and take your firearms, period. Because someone said so, without giving you a chance to prove or defend yourself whatsoever. So and that bill actually, and there is a red flag extreme risk protection order, or otherwise known as ERPO, bill that is facing the New York State Senate right now. It already passed the New York State Assembly in 2017. It is sitting and waiting for the New York State Senate to take it up. And it's not popular, and it is not moving forward. So in an election year, with that being unpopular, well, Governor Cuomo has made a decision. And the best way he can try and further take away the Second Amendment rights of people of New York is to deny the constituents their constitutional right, their natural right to defend themselves. And instead, he's going to the teachers. He is proposing to go to teachers and make them law enforcement officials and to seize the firearms of families across the United States, New York. And I would imagine, since he's running for president in 2020, he's going to try that across the nation as well. That teachers are now going to be law enforcement officials, and when they identify a student that is troubled or maybe in a troubled home, that they can then use a backdoor red flag law to allow the government to break into that home, violate the Fourth Amendment right, and take the firearms away from that family. Is that not terrifying? Is everyone not terrified? I mean, and the allusion is to Nazi Germany, but any totalitarian government, we see this all the time, where the first thing that they do is they take away the firearms. And we hear all the time teachers say, well, They can't do certain things. That's not part of their job. Matter of fact, the argument currently is teachers can't be armed in schools because they're not law enforcement officials. They're not trained for that. Guess what? Teachers are not trained to identify what's happening in someone's home and whether or not anyone in the home who is not in the school is a danger to the community. They are not legal scholars. They're not lawyers, and they're not social workers. They don't have the qualifications to do this. How can they go and authorize the government to go into your home and to go into your privacy of your home and take your firearms, violating your Second Amendment rights because some teacher saw that little Johnny scored low on a test? If Johnny is there and he's, I don't know, playing for the football team and he seems tired and the teacher doesn't like that, they will assume that, and the presumption is, well, that's because of his home life and therefore we have to do that. Little Johnny goes to school and he gets in a scuffle with one of his other students. Maybe Johnny doesn't agree with the idea that he has to assume everyone is a racist, and he gets into a fight saying, I'm not a racist, even though the media is saying that he should be considered a racist. He doesn't like that. He gets in a fight. He gets a black eye, goes into class. The teacher sees the black eye, says he must have got that at his home, calls up the court, says, Johnny has a black eye. He has a dangerous home life. Go into his house, take the guns away from his family, and we will protect him and our community. And, after the fact, when the family has no due process, somewhere in the next year, they can go to court and see if they can try and get those firearms back. But the government's going to be involved first. And by the way, if the government's coming into your house to try and take away your guns, they're also going to send Child Protection Services, CPS, into your home here in New York State. They're going to send them into your home and they're going to try and take your kids away as well. Because if your house is so dangerous that they have to have the police come in and take away your firearm, it's too dangerous for you to have kids. And so they're going to try and take away those kids so the state can raise those kids for you. This is dangerous. I mean, do you see how dangerous this is? That this is the government saying that they are going to take away your rights, your freedoms, your privileges, and they're going to take away your family too, as a consequence of that. Unqualified individuals who have no knowledge are going to try and interfere with your daily life and the way you raise your family because the government, in the form of Governor Cuomo, says, I don't like it. Because he doesn't like firearms, and because even though he is protected by a slew of firearms in terms of his security, even though that he is being protected by firearms and he has the right to have a firearm, you shouldn't because you're just a lowly person. He's the governor, as if that makes any difference. And his rights are better than your rights. And he gets to decide that you don't have the right to a Second Amendment to own a firearm. And he has the right to, under that guise that he's putting out there, to have the government break into your home, violate your Fourth Amendment rights, go through your home, take your firearms, and then send in Child Protection Services and deny you the right to raise your children. Because they are connected. It isn't in the article, but it is directly connected. If your household is too dangerous to have a firearm, your household's too dangerous to have your kids. So the state wants to raise your kids for you and teach them what they want those kids to know, the values that they approve of. And in New York State, that means the furthest left ideology, which means that you are just wrong. You don't know what to do. This is dangerous. It's not just programming of minds. It's not just turning kids into informants in their households, because there's going to be some kids, junior high school, elementary school, they don't understand the consequences of these things. They're going to be in an argument, oh, I couldn't go to see this movie. I couldn't go over to my friend's house. I'm going to get back at you, and I'm going to tell the teacher that something bad happened, which we hear all the time right now, and CPS is involved. And then they're going to tell the teacher that, and under Governor Cuomo's directive, the teacher is going to turn around, call up the court, and say, this is a home that is not safe. Take their guns away. And they're going to come and get them. And then you, without having ever gone into a courtroom, you are denied the due process to be able to protect yourself. And you have to go in without due process denied to you, which is your constitutional right. And you have to go fight the government and say, what are you talking about? My kid was upset because I didn't buy them a teddy bear, because I didn't let them go to a movie. Give me back my guns. Get out of my house. Stop trying to brainwash my kids. That's the fight you have to have. This is insane. We should all be outraged, massively, insanely outraged, because this is wrong. Governor Cuomo is overreaching. He is a governor of a state. He is not a king. He is not a president. He is not some totalitarian who can just go out there and make up whatever he wants. I understand he thinks that this is great. New York is a super blue state, and we see a lot of the far left radical ideas here. He wants to be New York to be more radical to the left than even California. He wants this to be the progressive capital of the nation. He said so 3 years ago in his State of the State address, that he is pushing forward to make us not just blue, but socialist. He wants he wants New York State to be socialist, and he's going to run for president of 2020 on the idea that we should be a more socialist, more radical, progressive nation than ever before. And part of his plan is to do this. And since he cannot get the red flag laws, the extreme risk protection orders passed in the New York State Senate and cannot make this law, he is looking to get around that by going to teachers who are unqualified to be able to take your firearms from you and to brainwash your kids by taking the kids away from you too. Now, you may disagree with this. You may not agree, and I invite you, I will have links for these articles to go and read it for yourself and learn about the extreme risk protection orders and to read about that, and you can make the decision for yourself. But I have to tell you, I think it's dangerous. I think this is insane. This man should not be reelected, and we should actively take precautions to make sure that these kind of things do not get passed. We must stop this. It's a violation of your Fourth Amendment, your Second Amendment, your due process. It is violating your rights. Be involved. And if you think I'm wrong, tell me how I'm wrong. If you don't think that this will be able to do these things, that these are the consequences of his actions, please tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me how this is not logical, step by step, based on what he is doing and what is in the Senate right now, in the state Senate, the bills that are being proposed. Tell me how I am wrong. I truly want to know. Let's make sure we hear everybody. I could be incorrect. Let's find out. Let's make sure that we all are on the same page, because I believe that if you are aware of this and you realize the ramifications of what this means, not just what he's saying, I will protect the kids, we're going to protect our schools. No, there is another step here. And then what? Follow it up. Not just, oh, this is what it's going to do today. What's it going to do tomorrow? What's the next step? What is the next logical thing that happens with this? You're not just protecting a kid by taking the guns away. You're going into a home, violating the Fourth Amendment. I know I said it 3 times now. Violating the Fourth Amendment, violating the Second Amendment, and denying the due process, and brainwashing kids as well. That is insane in the United States. We have to stop this. I don't care if you vote for Larry Sharpe or you vote for Mark Molinaro or you vote for Casper the Ghost. Don't re-elect Governor Cuomo. And I have to say, from Cynthia Nixon, who's even further left than Governor Cuomo is, I don't believe that would be the best thing. But you don't have to believe me. You don't have to agree. You can vote for anyone you want, but be informed. Read this, understand the consequences, and then make your decision. And if you think I'm wrong after reading this, reading these articles, reading about the ERPO, the red flag laws, and you think that in the due process that it denies, if you think I'm wrong, let me know how. I truly would like to hear that. Well, folks, I've gone over time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I do try and make them as best I can. But it's a midweek episode of the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. Please, you can reach me both on the podcast. You can reach me on Facebook. My name is Michael Voss. You can also find me on Twitter at mvconsult. That's my Twitter. Or you can reach me on my email, info@vossconsult.com. I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. And please share this if you agree or even if you disagree and want people to know and talk to me about it. I look forward to it. And for our exit music today, we're going to go with Adam Ate the Apple is the name of the band. Their album is No Flying Cars. And I think that the best thing, we're going to go with Matches, their number 5 song on their album. So with that, I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.
I bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road we're on. Lead me astray, you little pussycat. Let's take this day and make it a disaster. Oh, I know what you're after. Happily ever after ain't a joke to you. Still the hand, won the night. Yes, Lord, will you please spare this life? He said no. There's no survivors on this road. Bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road. No survivors, no survivors on this road we're on.